She disappeared at midnight without a trace. Welcome to Fog Casebook. I am your host, Valor. Comment where you're listening from. I read every note with gratitude. Let's begin. Midnight had just struck when the last of the violins fell silent at the Winterbourne Gala, leaving behind a shimmering echo that clung to the crystal chandeliers like a final, trembling note of warning. Lady Clarissa Harwood, one of England's most envied heiresses, the only daughter of the wealthy widower, Lord Edmund Harwood, had been seen mere minutes before, laughing softly in the conservatory as moonlight wove silver threads across her pale silk gown. The gala had been held in her honor, celebrating her impending engagement to the dashing but financially troubled Captain Lionel Rathbone. But now, Clarissa was gone. The vast Winterbourne estate was a jewel of the Sussex countryside, its marble halls and grand drawing rooms glowing with the warm opulence of old money. But beneath the golden surface, tension simmered. Guests whispered in urgent clusters. The orchestra members packed away their instruments with wide-eyed glances. Servants tried and failed to contain their tremors. Outside, the fog crept low across the lawns, swallowing anything that dared stray from the circle of lantern light. At precisely 12:15, a footman had rushed into the ballroom, his face an alarming shade of white. "Lady Clarissa," he stammered. She is nowhere to be found." Lord Harwood's cane clattered to the marble floor. Captain Rathbone's expression curdled into a mixture of shock and something far darker. The guests reacted as high society always did when confronted with scandal. First disbelief, then fascination, then fear. At 12:20, Clarissa's clutch purse was discovered lying abandoned in the conservatory. One of her gloves rested on the tiled floor, its fingers stretched out as though pointing to something or someone in the darkness beyond the French doors. At 12:30, a maid reported faint footprints near the edge of the ornamental lake. Another guest claimed to have heard a woman's cry. A third insisted they had seen the silhouette of a man fleeing toward the eastern hedge maze. And by 1 o'clock, the rumor had spread to every guest. Lady Clarissa Harwood had vanished at midnight. The local authorities were summoned at once, though their efforts produced little more than confusion. The fog was thick, their boots cumbersome, and their nerves rattled by the magnitude of the affair. They searched the lake, the gardens, the stables. Nothing. Not a whisper of the heiress remained. Lord Harwood, trembling with fury and grief, insisted that a message be sent immediately to London. "A kidnapping, a scandal, or worse," he muttered. "Only one man can make sense of this ghastly affair. Send word to him, at once." And so, at dawn, just as the first pale light touched the frost-dusted lawns, a sleek motor car rolled to a stop before the iron gates of Winterbourne Estate. A small figure stepped out, impeccably dressed in a tailored overcoat, gloves spotless, mustache groomed to perfection. He paused, surveyed the grounds with a sharp, appraising eye, and frowned at the disordered footprints in the frost. "Mon Dieu," he murmured softly. "Already I see chaos, and with chaos there is always crime." Monsieur Hercule Poirot had arrived. With delicate precision, he lifted his walking stick, tapped it lightly against the gravel, and proceeded toward the great house, toward the mystery of Lady Clarissa Harwood, the heiress who vanished at midnight. Lord Harwood was waiting for him in the great hall, his dressing gown hastily belted over an evening shirt, his face drawn and grey in the cold morning light. A maid hovered in the background with a tray of untouched tea, eyes red from a sleepless night. "Monsieur Poirot," Lord Harwood said, striding forward and gripping his hand with unexpected force, "you are here. Thank God. This is a nightmare." Poirot inclined his head, his expression grave, his dark eyes moving with quick, bird-like precision, taking in the crumpled rug near the door, the muddy trace of a boot print on the marble, the faint tremor that ran through his host's fingers. "You are kind," Poirot said. But it is not to the good God that you must give thanks. It is to the efficiency of the English motor car." His mustache twitched. "Now, Lord Harwood, you will be so good as to tell me everything. From the beginning. Exactement, if you please. There is nothing so fatal to the little grey cells as vagueness." Lord Harwood led him toward the morning room, where a fire had been lit, but did little to chase away the chill of unease. As they entered, several people rose from their seats with varying degrees of stiffness and alarm. "These are the guests who remained the night," Lord Harwood said. Since Clarissa disappeared." Poirot's eye swept the room and he bowed slightly. "1,000 pardons," he said, "that I intrude upon you in such distressing circumstances. I am Hercule Poirot, at your service." They regarded him with that mixture of curiosity and skepticism that Poirot had seen in so many drawing-rooms before. The English were never quite sure what to make of him at first sight. Lord Harwood gestured. "My future son-in-law, Captain Lionel Rathbone." The captain stood, tall and broad-shouldered, his evening clothes slightly rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. There was about him a certain handsomeness, but it was shadowed by restlessness, his fingers drumming against the arm of the chair. Clarissa's companion and cousin, Miss Beatrice Lane. Beatrice rose as well, a slim young woman with intelligent, watchful eyes and neat fair hair drawn back severely. Her hands were clasped so tightly that her knuckles stood out white. Mr. Arthur Pemberton, my solicitor and oldest friend. A stout, balding man with pince-nez bowed brusquely. His lips were pressed into a line that might have indicated disapproval or fear. And Dr. Julian Marsh, our family physician, who was also a guest last night. A tall man, clean-shaven with the self-contained air of the professional who has seen all manner of distress and is not easily surprised. Yet his gaze flickered just once to the windows as though measuring the distance to the drive. "There are also the servants," Lord Harwood added. "My butler, Simmons, the maids, the footman. I've ordered that no one is to leave the house or grounds until you give permission." Poirot inclined his head approvingly. "You have imposed a little order on this chaos, Lord Harwood. That is good. It is always the first step." He moved closer to the fire, warming his gloved hands, and then turned back to them. "Now, if you will permit, I would like a brief word from each of you. Not yet the interrogation. No, that will come after." His eyes gleamed. "For the moment, I seek only impressions, feelings, the first brush-strokes, as you say, upon the canvas." Captain Rathbone spoke first. "Impressions. I have only one, Monsieur Poirot. Clarissa would not simply disappear. If she is not here, then something devilish has happened to her, and the police—" He made an impatient gesture. "They blunder about in the fog while Clarissa—" His voice caught, and he turned away abruptly, jaw working. Poirot watched him thoughtfully. "You loved Mademoiselle Harwood very much, Captain." The captain's head snapped up. "Yes," he said curtly. "I did. I do." "And you are to be married soon, n'est-ce pas?" "In a month." "A marriage of love, of course," murmured Poirot. His tone was mild. His eyes were not. Rathbone flushed, his mouth tightening. "What are you implying?" "Rien du tout," said Poirot smoothly. "I do but observe. You are a soldier. You speak directly, with passion. It is noted." His gaze shifted to Beatrice. "And you, Mademoiselle Lane? You are the cousin and companion of Lady Clarissa. You know her well, I think." Beatrice's voice was low and controlled. "We grew up together, Monsieur Poirot. I know her better than anyone. She is impulsive, yes, but not foolish. She wouldn't run off without a word. Not like this. Not in the middle of her own engagement party." "Ah," Poirot nodded. "So you, too, do not believe in the voluntary disappearance?" Her eyes flashed. "Clarissa may be many things, but she is not cruel. She would not do that to her father." Poirot turned to Mr. Pemberton, who had been polishing his pince-nez with unnecessary vigor. As for you, Monsieur Pemberton, you have known the family for long. 30 years, Pemberton said tersely. Lord Harwood's affairs and Clarissa's since she came of age. This catastrophe is not only a personal shock. Clarissa was, he cleared his throat. She is central to the Harwood estate. Financially, you mean? Pemberton hesitated, glanced at Lord Harwood, then nodded once. Yes. Eh bien, Poirot said softly. Money. It is always there, somewhere in the shadows. It is like the cat in the garden. It leaves little paw marks everywhere, even when you do not see the cat itself. He allowed that to hang in the air a moment before turning to Dr. Marsh. And you, Doctor, you know Lady Clarissa in another way. In the health, in the nerves, in the mind. Was she well? Dr. Marsh folded his hands. Physically, yes. Nervous at times. A little overwrought, perhaps. But nothing extraordinary for a young woman under considerable social pressure. His gaze was level, but his fingers betrayed a faint, rhythmic twitch. If you are asking whether she was likely to harm herself, Monsieur Poirot, my answer is no. Mademoiselle Harwood, then, was neither desperate nor deranged, Poirot summarized. She was, according to those who loved and observed her, a young woman about to enter upon a marriage that was, how shall we say, significant both emotionally and financially. He turned in a small circle, taking in their faces. And yet at midnight, poof, she vanishes. Her glove is found. Her purse is left behind. There are footprints, there is a cry, there is perhaps a shadow fleeing into the fog. So dramatic, so... He gave a delicate shudder. Untidy. Lord Harwood sank into a chair, his shoulders bowed. What do you make of it, Monsieur Poirot? For the moment I make nothing, Poirot said calmly. I arrange the facts upon the table, like the pieces of a jigsaw. Some do not belong. Some are turned upside down. Before I say, this is a castle, or this is a church, I must be sure I have all the pieces in their place. He clasped his hands. I will first see the conservatory, where Lady Clarissa was last seen. After that, Lord Harwood, I shall speak to your servants. The feet that tread backstage, they often see what the eyes on the stage do not. The group stirred. There were exchanged glances, fleeting, charged. Poirot noted each one, storing it away in that neat, ordered mind of his. As for you, mesdames et messieurs, he added gently, I must ask that you remain available to me throughout the day. You will find me, I assure you, most persistent. When I have spoken properly with each of you, then perhaps... His mustache lifted faintly. The little grey cells will begin to whisper something interesting. He turned toward the door, Lord Harwood hurrying to lead the way. Behind Poirot, in the uneasy silence, a log shifted in the grate with a soft crackle, sending a spray of sparks upward. Of those who watched him go, each carried a secret thought, a private fear, or a private hope. Poirot did not see their faces just then. He did not need to. Poirot followed Lord Harwood through a series of long, dim hallways where the remnants of the previous night's gala still lingered. Wilting garlands, half-burnt candles, and the faint, cloying sweetness of champagne spilled on marble. The house seemed to hold its breath, as though listening for Clarissa's laughter to return and reassure it that nothing terrible had occurred. But nothing returned. The silence felt heavy. They reached the conservatory, its glass walls beaded with morning condensation, letting in a dull, wintry light. The air was cool and carried the faint scent of night-blooming jasmine. Poirot paused just inside the doorway, lifting one hand for quiet. Lord Harwood halted instantly, watching him with a strained anticipation. "Do not disturb anything," Poirot murmured, as though speaking to the room itself. "Let us see what story has been written here." The conservatory was expansive, filled with tall ferns, potted orchids, and the broad leaves of tropical plants that rustled faintly as a draught slipped under the door frames. A chaise longue stood near the window, its cushions slightly indented. Someone had sat here recently. Poirot moved toward it, running a gloved finger along the fabric. Lady Clarissa was here alone before midnight. So the footman said, Lord Harwood replied. He passed by the corridor and saw her through the glass, speaking on the telephone, a private line for her use. Très intéressant, Poirot murmured. A telephone call. To whom? I wish I knew. The maid checked. No record remains on the log. Clarissa must have dialed directly. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And afterward? She was seen no more. Poirot crouched to examine the floor. In the faint layer of condensation that had drifted from the glass panels onto the tiles, he found faint traces, tiny ridges, smudges that hinted at movement. But the servant's frantic activity overnight had blurred many details. Even so, he found the glove. It lay where it had been discovered, pale ivory, embroidered with delicate silver thread. Poirot lifted it delicately between two fingers. A lady does not drop such a glove without noticing, he said quietly. This is not an accident. It is a message, or a struggle. Lord Harwood swallowed. You believe she did not leave willingly? Poirot did not answer at once. He looked instead toward the French doors leading to the garden. Their panes were streaked with frost, but someone had touched the brass handle recently. Poirot leaned close, inspecting the smudges, his breath tightening in concentration. A hurried hand, he observed. Not a deliberate departure. No. He opened the door. A blast of cold air rushed in. The fog had thinned since dawn, but the lawn still held patches where footprints from the previous night were preserved in the frost. He bent low, examining the prints. 2 sets of feet, he murmured. One lighter, one heavier. The heavier set moves with purpose. The lighter hesitates. Lord Harwood stepped forward. You think someone walked her out, forced her? Poirot lifted a hand. Perhaps. Perhaps not. It is possible that Lady Clarissa went into the garden willingly, but not alone. He pointed to a patch where the prints vanished abruptly. Here the ground is harder, and there, notice the deeper indentations, as though someone braced themselves. Lord Harwood looked ill. Poirot straightened, brushing a speck of frost from his coat. And the cry that was heard. The maid insists she heard a woman scream. Poirot allowed himself a slow breath. A cry, footprints, a vanished heiress, and someone fleeing into the fog. So dramatic. And yet, drama often hides very mundane motives. They re-entered the conservatory, closing the door against the cold. Poirot's gaze returned to the telephone. You say it is a private line. Only Lady Clarissa used it? Yes, Lord Harwood said. She insisted on it. Said it was necessary for matters of the estate. And Captain Rathbone? Did she speak with him last night? Lord Harwood hesitated. Yes, but... His eyes darted away. There was a quarrel. A small one. Ah, Poirot said softly. A quarrel. There's always a quarrel in matters of the heart. He turned his focus to the chaise again. A silk scarf lay draped over one arm, crushed slightly as though gripped in haste. Poirot examined it, noting the faint scent of Clarissa's perfume intertwined with something sharper. Cologne, but not Lionel Rathbone's. He had passed the man earlier, noted the faint tang of sandalwood. No, this was different. More citrus, more foreign. He tucked that detail silently into the growing arrangement in his mind. We must not, however, jump to conclusions, he said mildly. It is always a temptation to see a shadow and declare it a man. Lord Harwood blinked. What do you require next? The servants, Poirot replied. One footman has already shown nervousness. The one who found the glove. Simmons, was it? No, that was Henry. Then we shall speak with Henry, and with Simmons, and the maid who heard the cry." Poirot's tone sharpened slightly. "I will know what they saw, and what they think they saw." Lord Harwood nodded, eager to cooperate. "Of course, I will summon them to the small sitting room." Poirot stopped him with a raised hand. "Non, milord. If you summon them, they will come prepared with stories, rehearsed in fear. Instead, I shall visit them where they work. The truth is found more easily in the corners of a home than in its drawing rooms." Without waiting for reply, Poirot moved briskly toward the service corridor that branched from the conservatory. Lord Harwood followed, somewhat bewildered. They passed through the narrow hall where the cheerful clutter of domestic life had been replaced by tension. Whispered conversations halted as Poirot approached. Anxious eyes watched him with a mixture of hope and dread. Poirot paused before the doorway of the scullery, where a young maid stood frozen with a stack of plates in her hands. Her face was pale. Her breath came in shallow bursts. "You," Poirot said gently. "Mademoiselle, you're the one who heard the cry, yes?" She swallowed hard and nodded. "Come," Poirot said softly. "You will tell me exactly what you heard. Exactement. And you will not fear me. It is truth that I seek, not blame." The girl's lip trembled. I heard her, sir. I know it was Lady Clarissa. It sounded frightened. And then something else." Poirot tilted his head. "Something else?" The maid's voice dropped to a whisper. A man's voice, low, urgent, as if warning her to be quiet. Poirot's eyes glinted with sudden sharpness. "And were you able," he asked softly, "to recognize this voice?" The girl hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the plates. Her eyes darted toward the hallway where the guests resided. Poirot leaned in, his voice a whisper of patience and steel. "Mademoiselle," he said, "you are safe. Tell me, whose voice did you hear?" All color drained from her face. "It sounded like—" Her throat worked. "It sounded like Captain Rathbone." Poirot did not move. He did not even blink. Inside the ordered chambers of his mind, however, a single piece of the puzzle clicked neatly into place. But he said nothing at all. Poirot let the silence settle for a moment, allowing the maid's trembling confession to fully imprint itself upon the atmosphere of the narrow scullery. She stood rigid, as though fearing the very walls might betray her words to the wrong ears. Lord Harwood, beside Poirot, had gone quite still, his breath caught between disbelief and dawning horror. Poirot spoke gently, his tone calm and measured. "You have done well, mademoiselle. You have given only what you heard, without embellishment. That is the first sign of truth." The girl blinked rapidly, relief and fear warring in her eyes. "I didn't want to say it, sir. The captain, he can be so fearsome when angered." "Anger, ma petite, is often the refuge of those who fear being known too well," Poirot murmured. "Go now, and speak of this to no one. It is important." She nodded quickly and disappeared through a side door, leaving the faint clatter of her hurried footsteps echoing behind. Lord Harwood let out a long, shaky breath. "Poirot, surely you don't believe Lionel would harm Clarissa? He was distraught last night. Visibly so." "Ah, yes," Poirot said lightly, clasping his hands behind his back. "He performed his distress with admirable passion." "Performed?" "But naturellement. It was a display. Whether sincere or strategic, we have not yet determined." Lord Harwood looked stricken. "But the maid, she might be mistaken. She must be." Poirot gave a small shrug, though his eyes were razor-sharp. "It is possible. But her fear was real, her uncertainty absent. She believes what she heard, and that is enough, for now, to prompt questions." With that, Poirot moved further down the corridor, his step brisk despite the hours of investigation that stretched ahead. The next door stood ajar, revealing the butler polishing the silver with deliberate motions that betrayed an effort to maintain composure. "Simmons," Poirot said. The butler straightened at once. Monsieur Poirot, you were on duty throughout the gala? Yes, sir, until shortly after midnight. And what did you observe? Simmons' jaw tightened. There was a certain tension among the guests. Nothing overt, but noticeable. Between whom? Captain Rathbone and Miss Lane, sir. Poirot's eyebrows lifted delicately. Captain Rathbone and Clarissa's cousin? You surprise me. I was passing by the library door. Simmons explained, his voice low. I heard raised voices. Miss Lane sounded distressed. Captain Rathbone, angry. And what words did you hear? Simmons hesitated. I heard the captain say, "You will keep out of this, Beatrice. I won't have you meddling." And Miss Lane replied, "I will not let you hurt her again." That was all before the sound of footsteps approached, and I thought it prudent to move on. Poirot's interest sharpened like a needle-catching light. Again, he repeated softly. An important word, that. Lord Harwood ran a hand through his thinning hair. I had no idea, none at all, that Lionel and Beatrice, that anything passed between them. And yet something clearly did, Poirot said. Perhaps small, perhaps significant. We shall see. He turned toward the narrow servants' staircase that wound up toward the main hall. Come, milord. There is someone else we must speak with before I question the captain. Who? Miss Beatrice Lane. Lord Harwood hesitated. Poirot continued without waiting for consent. He found Beatrice in the small sitting room, alone for the moment, gazing out through the tall windows at the pale morning sun beginning to burn away the last of the fog. She stiffened at their entrance, smoothing her skirt with nervous precision. Monsieur Poirot, she said quietly. Lord Harwood. Miss Lane. Poirot greeted her with a polite bow. You will forgive the intrusion. There are matters that require clarity. She nodded. Ask what you must. Poirot approached slowly, his gaze steady yet not unkind. Tell me, mademoiselle, what were you discussing so heatedly with Captain Rathbone in the library last night? Her breath caught. Color rose sharply in her cheeks. Simmons heard. Yes, Poirot said, and what he heard concerns me greatly. Beatrice clasped her hands tightly. It was nothing. A private matter. Private but not irrelevant, I think. Poirot's tone remained gentle but insistent. You said to Captain Rathbone, I will not let you hurt her again. This implies previous harm. What did you mean? Beatrice turned away. Her shoulders trembled. When she spoke, her voice was brittle. Lionel and Clarissa quarreled. Often. He is charming, yes, but there is a darkness in him. He needs control. Clarissa challenged him. Did he strike her? No, she said quickly. Not that. But his temper, oh, that temper. She squeezed her eyes shut for a moment. I feared it. I feared he might frighten her more than he realized. Poirot watched her carefully. You warned him. Yes, Beatrice whispered. I told him I would speak to Lord Harwood if he hurt her, emotionally or otherwise, that she deserved better. And how did he respond? He threatened me, she said, turning back to them, her eyes shining with anger that seemed finally to rise above her fear. He told me to stay out of his affairs or I would regret it. Lord Harwood staggered back a step. Good God! Poirot's expression did not change, but his gaze sharpened. And after this dispute, where did you go? To my room. I wanted nothing more to do with him. You saw Lady Clarissa afterward? No, Beatrice said. She was still in the conservatory when I passed by. She was upset, pacing. I wished to go to her, but I thought it best to give her time. Did you hear anything? A voice, perhaps? Or a cry in the night? Beatrice hesitated. Then slowly she nodded. A cry, yes, but faint. I wasn't sure if it was real or just my worry. I didn't know. Poirot stepped back, folding his hands. Thank you, Miss Lane. You have been honest. Honesty is the first step toward resolution. She watched him anxiously. Poirot, do you believe Lionel is responsible? Belief, mademoiselle, is a luxury. I deal only in truth, and the truth— He paused, his gaze distant for a moment, aligning facts within that impeccable mental order. The truth is still forming. He turned toward the doorway. But now it is time, I think, he said quietly, that I speak with Captain Rathbone, and I suspect he will try very hard to hide what the others have revealed. Captain Lionel Rathbone was found in the billiard room, standing rigidly by the tall window with a tumbler of untouched brandy in his hand. Though he had changed into a fresh shirt, the strain of the night showed plainly in the dark crescents beneath his eyes and the way his shoulders were drawn, as if bracing against unseen blows. He turned sharply at Poirot's entrance, jaw tight. I had hoped to gather my thoughts before speaking again, he said, forcing a brittle calm. But I suppose you won't wait. No, Poirot replied gently. Truth waits for no man, Captain, and time is precious in such cases. Lord Harwood lingered near the doorway, torn between loyalty and dread. Rathbone shot him a look that was almost accusatory, then turned back to Poirot. Very well, he said, setting the glass down with more force than necessary. Ask what you must. Poirot did not approach immediately. Instead, he studied the man from a distance, his gaze traveling from the captain's restless foot to the stiff curve of his fingers. He saw the struggle within him. Anger, fear, guilt, something darker. You were seen quarreling with Miss Beatrice Lane last night, Poirot began. Voices raised, tempers inflamed. Rathbone's mouth tightened. I don't deny we quarreled. Beatrice interferes where she is not wanted. That is one interpretation, Poirot said mildly. Another is that she is protective of Lady Clarissa. Rathbone bristled. She meddles, that's what she does. Always whispering doubts into Clarissa's ear, always painting me as some sort of villain. She has never liked me. Poirot's voice remained soft, but firm. And what of you, Captain? Do you like Miss Lane? Rathbone gave a short, bitter laugh. I tolerate her, for Clarissa's sake. Poirot stepped closer. She says she warned you, that she told you not to hurt Clarissa again. What does she mean, again, Captain? Rathbone's face flushed with anger. Nothing. She twists everything. Clarissa and I had disagreements, yes, what couple does not? But to imply I hurt her, emotionally, physically, in any way, is absurd. Poirot watched him for several seconds, saying nothing. Rathbone shifted, suddenly uncomfortable under that calm, penetrating gaze. And yet, Poirot said softly, 3 people have now spoken of your temper. Lies, Rathbone snapped. People see what they expect to see. Poirot's tone sharpened just a fraction. A maid heard a woman cry out last night, and she heard a man as well, a low, urgent voice, a warning voice. The color drained from Rathbone's face. Poirot held his eyes. She believes it was you. There was a flicker. Fear quickly masked beneath a wave of outrage. This is nonsense. I was nowhere near the garden. Poirot raised a brow. Oh, then perhaps you were in the conservatory. The footprints suggest 2 people walked out through the French doors, 2 sets of prints, one heavier, one lighter. Rathbone stiffened. Are you accusing me? I accuse no one, Poirot said, his tone smooth. I merely observe. And I observe that your voice, Captain, has a certain quality, a resonance, that could easily be mistaken in the fog and dark. Rathbone strode forward, fists clenched. Poirot, enough. Clarissa is missing. God knows what's become of her, and instead of finding her, you hound me with baseless insinuations. Poirot did not flinch. On the contrary, Captain, I seek only clarity, and clarity requires honesty. Rathbone glared, breathing heavily. Poirot spoke again, more quietly. Tell me of your conversation with Lady Clarissa, before she vanished. Something flickered across Rathbone's face. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear, but it vanished behind a mask of controlled neutrality. "We spoke briefly," he said, "and yes, we quarreled. Clarissa was upset about something. She refused to tell me what." "Was it connected?" Poirot asked delicately. "To money?" Rathbone's eyes widened for the briefest instant. "Money? No. What makes you say that?" "Because Lady Clarissa's finances have changed recently," Poirot said. "Subtly, but meaningfully. And I am told that you, Captain, are a man of limited means." Rathbone's composure cracked. "Are you suggesting I pursued her fortune? Is that it? That I'm some opportunistic scoundrel?" "I suggest nothing," Poirot said. "I ask." Rathbone paced, fingers raking through his hair. "This is absurd. Clarissa and she loved me." Poirot tilted his head. "And yet she was upset last night, distressed enough to retire alone to the conservatory, distressed enough to place a private telephone call." Rathbone froze. "She made a call?" "Ah," Poirot said softly. "You did not know." Rathbone swore under his breath, quietly, viciously. Poirot continued, "To whom did she speak? And did that call influence what happened afterward?" Rathbone was silent. Poirot pressed gently. "Captain, if you know even one detail, even one fragment, you must tell me. For Clarissa's sake." Rathbone's breath came quick and shallow. I saw her after the quarrel," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out. "Only for a moment. She was crying. She said she had made a terrible mistake." "What mistake?" "She wouldn't say." His voice shook now, stripped of bravado. "She only said that she was in danger, that someone was trying to force her into something. She begged me to leave her alone." Poirot leaned forward. "And did you?" "Yes," he whispered. "I thought she just needed space. I went for a walk around the corridors to clear my head. I swear I didn't go near the garden." Poirot studied him with profound stillness. "And what happened when you heard the cry?" Rathbone's head jerked up. "Cry? I heard no cry." Again, the smallest tremor, a flash of something unsteady behind the eyes. Poirot let the silence stretch, then softly, "Captain, you're not telling me everything." Rathbone's hands balled into fists. "I've told you what I know." "No," Poirot murmured. "You have told me what you wish me to hear, sir." Lord Harwood shifted uneasily. "Poirot, is Lionel truly—" Poirot lifted a hand. "Not yet, my lord. The picture is incomplete." He turned back to Rathbone. "Captain, remember this. The truth will emerge. Whether spoken by you, by another, or by the little grey cells themselves." Rathbone said nothing, his breath uneven, his composure fraying. Poirot stepped away. The interrogation had revealed much, but not enough. For now, suspicion coiled tightly around the captain, yet something in his fear seemed misaligned, as if he feared not guilt, but exposure of another sort, and Poirot knew the pattern of guilt too well to ignore when it did not quite fit. Poirot left Captain Rathbone standing rigid beside the billiard table, the man's breath still uneven, his eyes hollow with a fear that seemed to stretch beyond suspicion or guilt. Lord Harwood drifted behind Poirot like a man half in shadow, shaken not only by what he had heard, but by what he might yet have to face. The door closed with a soft click, sealing Rathbone inside. Poirot paused in the corridor, tugging gently at the cuffs of his immaculate shirt. "You see, my lord," he murmured, "he's like a violin string pulled too tight. One more turn, and it snaps." Lord Harwood lowered his voice. "Do you think he knows where Clarissa is?" Poirot gave a small sigh. "Ah, that is a different question. Does he know? Perhaps. But is he responsible? That I do not yet believe. There is fear in him, yes. But it is the fear of a man cornered by circumstance, not of a murderer." They moved down the corridor toward the main hall, where the soft murmur of staff activity hinted at a house trying desperately to return to order while trembling beneath the weight of uncertainty. As they passed a side table, Poirot's attention snagged on a small detail, a single petal from an orchid, pale lavender, crushed at its edge. He stopped. Clarissa's favorite flower, Lord Harwood murmured softly. She adored orchids. Poirot touched the petal with one delicate fingertip, and yet this one did not fall naturally. It has been torn. Someone brushed against the display with haste or distress. The direction of the fallen petal pointed subtly toward the east corridor. Poirot straightened. "Tell me, milord, what lies down this way?" Lord Harwood blinked. "Only a handful of guest rooms, the library and the study." Poirot gave a polite incline of his head. "Then perhaps we explore." They walked the quiet stretch of corridor, the hush of thick carpets beneath their steps swallowing each footfall. Midway down, a door stood slightly ajar, the library. Poirot pushed it open gently, revealing a dim room lined with tall mahogany shelves and the lingering scent of tobacco and old paper. A single lamp had been left burning on a side table, casting a warm pool of light across a leather armchair. Poirot moved forward, surveying the room with practiced precision. Nothing was obviously disturbed. No toppled books, no broken glass, until he noticed the faint indentation in the thick carpet near the French windows. Someone had knelt here recently. He went to the window, lifting the curtain with a gloved hand. The exterior garden path was visible beyond the frost-traced glass, though the fog outside softened its edges. Poirot's gaze sharpened. A small smudge, almost invisible, marked the brass handle. "Someone came in from the garden," Poirot murmured. "After the disappearance." Lord Harwood's breath hitched. "But who?" "That," Poirot said with a small, enigmatic smile, "is what we shall soon learn." He turned back toward the room, scanning the armchair, the table, the fireplace. It was the mantel that caught his eye next. A framed photograph stood among the porcelain ornaments, a young Clarissa seated beside her father, smiling brightly, youth and confidence shining in her features. Poirot stepped closer. "Milord," he said, "when was this taken?" "A few months ago," Lord Harwood replied, "at our summer home." Poirot's finger tapped lightly on the frame. "And the photographer was?" "Dr. Marsh," Lord Harwood said. "He is an amateur photographer." Poirot's mustache twitched. Interesting. He tucked the observation away as another piece of the quietly forming puzzle. Before he could say more, the faint echo of hurried footsteps sounded from the corridor. Simmons, the butler, appeared at the library door, his face paler than before. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, struggling for composure, "you asked to be informed if anything unusual was found." Poirot straightened, his interest immediate. "And something has been?" "Yes, sir. In Lady Clarissa's room." Lord Harwood turned sharply. "Her room? What is it?" Simmons bowed apologetically. "It is easier shown than explained, sir." Poirot exchanged a quick glance with Lord Harwood and followed Simmons swiftly up the main staircase. They reached Clarissa's room. Its door open, her lavender-scented perfume faint on the air, her belongings neat and orderly. The servant stood just inside, shifting anxiously. On Clarissa's writing desk lay a single sheet of paper, neatly folded. Poirot approached slowly, noting at once that it had not been there earlier. Its crispness spoke of newness, its placement deliberate. Lord Harwood's voice trembled. "What is this?" Poirot carefully opened the note. There were only 5 words. "Do not look for me." The handwriting, elegant and familiar, unmistakably belonged to Clarissa Harwood. Lord Harwood staggered back as though struck. "Clarissa wrote this?" Poirot remained very still, scanning the note with razor-sharp intensity. He noted the precise slant of the script, the absence of ink blotting, the pressure of the pen. Steady, but not quite natural. Forced, perhaps. He lifted the paper to the light, examining the backside. "No imprint," he murmured. It was written alone on the sheet, a deliberate message. Simmons spoke timidly. "Sir, the chambermaid found it. She swears it was not here earlier." Poirot tapped the page lightly. "Because it was placed here after the search began, and by someone who wished it to be found." Lord Harwood sank into a nearby chair. But why? Why would she say such a thing? Poirot turned, his expression grave but composed. "Because, my lord, either Lady Clarissa wanted to vanish, or someone wants us to believe she did." He folded the note slowly. "And I, Hercule Poirot, do not believe in such convenient messages. They smell too strongly of manipulation." He placed the note back on the desk. "Someone within this house," he said quietly, "is playing a dangerous game. And they believe themselves clever, but they forget." He straightened, his eyes gleaming with calm certainty. "That I am also playing." Poirot let the charged silence linger in Clarissa's bedroom, his gaze resting on the note as though it were a performer that had just delivered its final line, too perfectly timed, too carefully placed. Lord Harwood sat stunned, breathing in shallow, uneven pulls. The servants hovered anxiously, torn between curiosity and dread. Poirot finally turned to Simmons. "Who discovered the note?" "The chambermaid, Rose, sir," Simmons replied. "She came to refresh the room as ordered, and found it on the desk just so." "And this Rose, where is she now?" "In the hallway, sir. She's quite frightened." Poirot nodded. "Bring her in, if you please." Simmons stepped out, returning moments later with a young maid who looked scarcely older than 20. Her apron was wrinkled, and her hands twisted the hem nervously. She curtsied shakily. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered. Poirot's tone was gentle but firm. "Mademoiselle, you discovered this note. Tell me exactly what you saw." Rose swallowed. "My apologies, sir. I thought the room was empty when I came in. I picked up the water pitcher, and then I saw the paper sitting there. It wasn't there before, I swear it. I'd tidied this room during the night at Lord Harwood's request. There was no note." Poirot watched her keenly. "And the room was empty when you entered?" "Yes, sir. Quiet as anything." "Did you see anyone leave this corridor before you entered?" She hesitated, glancing quickly at Lord Harwood. "I saw someone at the far end, but it was only a glimpse." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Describe them." I don't know if it was a man or a woman. They were wearing a dark coat, moving fast. I only saw the back of them before they turned the corner." "That is useful," Poirot said softly. Then added, "And you are quite certain the note was not here before?" "Certain, sir." Poirot nodded once, dismissing her with a kind thank you. Rose scurried out, and Simmons closed the door quietly behind her. Lord Harwood buried his face in his hands. "Poirot, Clarissa's handwriting is unmistakable. What can this mean? Was she coerced? Threatened?" Poirot tapped the folded note with one fingertip. "The handwriting is hers, yes. But context, my lord. Context is everything." He stepped toward the writing desk, studying its immaculate surface. Clarissa's fountain pen lay in its stand, the nib recently cleaned. No blotter sheet beneath it bore the imprint of hurried or emotional writing. Everything was tidy, too tidy. Poirot ran a finger along the ink bottle. Still half full, not recently opened. Lord Harwood blinked. But then how? Someone wrote elsewhere and placed it here, Poirot concluded. Or Clarissa wrote it earlier. Under duress, but timing, that is the key. He turned to the servants. "You may leave us." They filed out quietly, leaving Poirot and Lord Harwood alone with the lingering scent of Clarissa's perfume. Poirot moved about the room slowly, examining the small personal details of Clarissa's life. The neatly arranged jewelry, the crystal perfume bottles, her favorite shawl draped over a chair as if waiting for her return. At the foot of the bed, an open trunk had been laid out but left unpacked, its array of gowns and fine fabrics untouched. Was Lady Clarissa preparing for travel? Poirot asked. No, Lord Harwood said, rising shakily. That trunk was for her honeymoon next month. She wished to begin assembling her outfits. Poirot's gaze drifted back to the trunk. He lifted a silk scarf from the top and pressed it lightly between his fingers. Beneath the layers of fabric, something felt misaligned, an indentation not belonging to the garments. Removing a folded gown, Poirot uncovered a slim, lacquered box, half concealed. Lord Harwood frowned. That is Clarissa's jewelry case. Poirot opened it carefully. Inside, nestled in velvet, lay an array of glittering diamonds and heirlooms, but one space, a central compartment, was conspicuously empty. What was kept here? Poirot asked. A necklace, Lord Harwood replied. The Harwood star, a priceless family piece. Clarissa was to wear it at the wedding. And it is missing. Lord Harwood paled. Poirot, you don't think she was taken for ransom? Poirot closed the box slowly. Perhaps. Or perhaps someone used Clarissa's disappearance to mask a theft. Or, his gaze flicked toward the note. Someone wishes us to believe both. He walked back toward the window, drawing the curtains aside to look out over the frosted gardens. The sun was rising now, casting long shadows that pointed toward the distant hedge maze. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Tell me, milord, who besides Clarissa had access to this room? Only Clarissa herself, and the maids, of course. But the door was never locked. Never locked, Poirot repeated. Yet a private note appears here this morning. A priceless necklace vanishes, and someone moves through the corridors at dawn with suspicious haste. He turned back to Lord Harwood. Milord, summon Dr. Marsh. Dr. Marsh? Lord Harwood blinked. Why him? Poirot's expression was mild, but his eyes gleamed with quiet certainty. Because a doctor notices things others do not. Because he was at the gala as a friend, yet moves through this house as though he belongs to it. And because his profession makes him intimately familiar with handwriting and pressure and coercion. Lord Harwood hesitated only a second before hurrying out. Poirot remained alone in Clarissa's room. He approached the note again, studying the angle of each stroke, the flow of the signature. Something in the slant, something in the final loop, tugged at his mind. Not wrong, not forgery, but not free. Poirot whispered to the quiet room, Mademoiselle Clarissa, what were you trying to tell me? The house answered only with silence. Then a faint thud echoed from down the corridor, urgent, stumbling. Poirot turned sharply, his instincts tightening like a wire. Someone was running, and not toward safety, but away from something, or someone they feared. Poirot moved swiftly into the corridor, his polished shoes making no more sound than a whispered thought. The thud he had heard was not the careless noise of a servant, nor the measured tread of a guest. It had held urgency, panic, a desire not to be found. He followed the faint echo toward the east wing, where the hallway bent into a narrower passage seldom used by visitors. As he rounded the corner, he saw a figure at the far end, half hidden by a tapestry. A hand clutched the fabric, then let go abruptly when its owner sensed movement behind them. The figure darted away. Poirot did not break into a run. He simply quickened his pace, the methodical tap of his shoes echoing steadily. "It is useless to flee," he called out mildly, his voice carrying with surprising authority. "Hercule Poirot always arrives where he intends." The corridor spilled into a small vestibule where two doors stood open, one leading to a linen closet, the other to a narrow servant's staircase, plunging downward. A faint rustling came from the closet. Poirot approached quietly and opened the door. Inside, crouched behind stacks of folded bedclothes, was Henry, the footman who had first found Clarissa's glove in the conservatory. His face was pallid, his breath sharp and uneven. When he saw Poirot, his shoulders slumped in resignation. "I wasn't running from you, sir," Henry blurted. "I swear it." Poirot arched an eyebrow. "And yet you ran." Henry wrung his hands. I heard Simmons say you found something new in Lady Clarissa's room. I got scared you'd think wrongly of me." Poirot stepped inside and closed the door behind them with deliberate calm. The footman swallowed hard. "Sir, I've done nothing. Nothing but what was asked of me." Poirot regarded him with a softened gaze. "Henry, mon ami, fear makes a man foolish, not guilty. You were in the conservatory when Lady Clarissa's glove was found. You were among the first to see her absence. You may have seen something, heard something you are afraid to admit." Henry's Adam's apple bobbed. He lowered his voice to a whisper. "I did hear something, sir, but it didn't seem important at first." Poirot folded his arms patiently. "I'm listening." "It was just after midnight," Henry began. "I was heading toward the conservatory to check the fires. I was near the east corridor when I heard footsteps, quick ones. Someone passed by the archway. Who? I didn't see their face, but they were moving fast, and they were carrying something. Heavy, I think. Their steps dragged a bit." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Carrying something heavy. Or someone?" Henry flinched. I don't know, but when they turned the corner I saw a bit of cloth. Pale cloth. Flowing. Like a gown." Poirot's voice dropped. "Like the gown Lady Clarissa was wearing." Henry nodded miserably. "I didn't think it could be her. I thought no one would. No one could." Poirot put a hand on his shoulder, a rare gesture. "Courage, mon garçon. You have helped more than you know." Henry looked up, startled and slightly soothed, though still trembling. Poirot moved to open the door. "And remember, when one hides, it makes the innocent look guilty. Be still, be truthful, and leave the little grey cells to do the rest." Henry nodded and slipped out toward the kitchen, looking relieved to escape. Poirot remained in the corridor for a moment, piecing the new detail into the growing mosaic of facts. Someone had moved through the house carrying something heavy, dragging slightly. Clarissa, unconscious, restrained, or was the figure an accomplice with another burden? Before he could explore the thought further, Lord Harwood appeared at the opposite end of the hall, breathless. "Poirot, Dr. Marsh is in the drawing-room. I told him you wished to speak with him." He seemed unsettled. Poirot inclined his head. "Then we must not keep him waiting." They walked together toward the drawing-room, where the door stood half open. Inside, Dr. Julian Marsh stood near the fireplace, arms folded, posture stiff as though bracing for impact. He turned sharply when Poirot entered, forcing a polite smile. "Monsieur Poirot, Lord Harwood, I hear there is news." Poirot studied him a moment before closing the door behind them, sealing the three men in the warm glow of the firelight. "Yes, Doctor. A note has been found in Lady Clarissa's room." Marsh blinked, surprised. "A note? From Clarissa?" "So it appears," Poirot said. "You know her handwriting, I think." Marsh straightened slightly. "Naturally. I've seen enough of her correspondence while attending to the family." Poirot stepped closer, holding out the folded paper. Marsh inspected it carefully, his eyes narrowing just a fraction. "Looks like her hand," he murmured, "though the strokes are tight, controlled." "Under strain?" Poirot prompted. "Possibly. This does not look like Clarissa's usual confident script." Poirot accepted the note back. "Dr. Marsh, You are a man accustomed to reading the physical signs of distress. Tell me, last night, did Lady Clarissa seem well to you? A brief pause. Too brief. Marcia's jaw shifted. She seemed agitated, but I put it down to the emotional pressure of the evening. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And did she speak to you privately? Marsh hesitated again, longer this time. Briefly, he said. She asked if I had a moment, but before she could say more, Captain Rathbone arrived and the opportunity vanished. Poirot tapped his chin. Did she seem frightened? Marsh's lips pressed together. Yes, he said finally. She did. Lord Harwood sagged, grief twisting his features. Why did no one tell me this? Dr. Marsh's expression darkened with guilt. Because, Edmund, I hoped it was nothing but nerves, and I feared prying. Poirot studied him carefully. The rigid posture, the slightly trembling hand, the guarded eyes. There was something in the doctor's manner that did not match the calm professionalism he displayed earlier. A tension beneath the surface. Doctor, Poirot said quietly, you were seen returning to the house late last night, through the garden. Can you explain why? Marsh's eyes flashed. Who said that? It does not matter, Poirot replied. Explain. Marsh hesitated, then exhaled slowly. Very well. I stepped outside for air. I had a headache. I walked to the garden bench. I only came back when the fog grew too thick. Poirot's face revealed nothing. And did you see anyone else outside? No. The answer came too quickly. Poirot let the silence stretch until Marsh shifted, visibly uneasy. Doctor, Poirot said softly, I ask you to be precise. A woman screamed last night. Someone moved through this house with haste. A necklace is missing. A note has appeared. And you, who claim to have been outside, saw nothing. Marsh's breath hitched. I saw a shadow, he whispered suddenly, near the hedge maze, but I could not tell who it was. Poirot's eyes gleamed, not with accusation, but recognition. Another piece had fallen into place. I see, Poirot murmured. And now, Dr. Marsh, I must ask you one more thing. Marsh swallowed. Yes? Poirot leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. When you saw Clarissa earlier in the evening, did she ask you for help? Marsh closed his eyes. Yes, he said quietly. She did. Poirot stood very still. And I fear, Marsh added in a trembling voice, that I failed her. Poirot did not speak at once. He allowed Dr. Marsh's confession to settle, watching the man with eyes that missed nothing. The rigidity of his shoulders, the tremor in his fingers, the way he stared at the carpet rather than at the grieving father standing beside him. When Poirot finally spoke, it was with a gentleness that nevertheless carried sharp precision. You say Lady Clarissa asked you for help. You must tell us. Help with what? Marsh exhaled shakily, passing a hand across his brow. She didn't have time to explain. She approached me during the gala, just after the dinner toasts. She seemed frightened. Properly frightened, not merely flustered. She asked if we could speak privately after the guests dispersed. I agreed. But before she could return, Captain Rathbone intercepted her, and, after that, I did not see her again. Lord Harwood's voice cracked. Why did she not come to me? Why go to you, Julian? Because she did not wish to burden you, Marsh replied quietly. She said as much. She feared upsetting you in your health. Lord Harwood turned away, stricken. Poirot continued to observe Marsh, as though listening not only to his words, but to the rhythm of his breath, the cadence of his guilt. And you did not think to follow her afterward? Poirot asked softly. I meant to, Marsh said. But I was detained by a guest, and then I could not find her. The conservatory was empty, the grounds were fogged over. I searched, Poirot, I truly did, but I found no trace of her. Poirot's expression did not reveal judgment, only a deep and methodical absorption. "Very well, Doctor. One further question. When you came inside from the garden, did your shoes leave tracks, footprints on the frost, perhaps?" Marsh blinked at him, startled. "I suppose they must have." Poirot's eyes glinted with quiet satisfaction. "Then it is most interesting that the footprints found near the lake were attributed to the unknown fleeing figure. But if you were also outside—" Marsh's eyes widened with panic. "Poirot, surely you don't believe—" Poirot raised a hand. "I believe nothing. I consider everything." Before Marsh could respond, the drawing-room door opened abruptly. Simmons entered, pale and clearly agitated. "Beg pardon, sir," he said, bowing rapidly. "But Miss Lane has taken ill. She's in the downstairs salon. The maid says she collapsed." Lord Harwood gasped. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Collapsed, you say? With no prior symptoms?" Simmons shook his head. "None, sir. She seemed quite well earlier." Poirot turned to Marsh. "Doctor, your presence is required." Marsh did not hesitate. Of course. He followed Simmons hurriedly out. Lord Harwood made to follow, but Poirot stopped him gently with a hand upon his arm. "Milord, you must not go. Not yet." Harwood stared at him, trembling. "But Beatrice, she may be dying." "No," Poirot said, firmly. "She is not dying, but something is unfolding, and I must observe it with clarity. Your presence would bring emotion where logic must rule." A beat passed. Lord Harwood gave a helpless nod, sinking onto the nearest settee with a groan. Poirot left him and followed Simmons and Marsh to the downstairs salon. Beatrice lay stretched faintly on a chaise longue, her face drained of colour but her breathing rapid and shallow. A maid knelt beside her, patting her hand frantically. Poirot entered quietly. Marsh was already leaning over her, fingers at her wrist. "It is a faint," he announced quickly. "Her pulse is fast, but steady." Poirot stepped closer, studying Beatrice's face. Her eyelids fluttered weakly, but beneath that fragility, Poirot detected something else. Fear. He knelt beside her. "Mademoiselle," he said softly. "Can you hear me?" Beatrice's eyes opened slowly. She focused on Poirot, and her hand reached toward him with a sudden, desperate grasp. "Monsieur Poirot." Her voice was a thin whisper. Someone is lying." Poirot leaned closer. "You must be precise, mademoiselle. Who is lying?" Her breath shuddered, fear, or perhaps the residue of shock. "Not Lionel," she whispered. "Not Clarissa. Someone else. Someone who pretends calm. Someone who hides anger beneath quietness." Poirot felt a very soft, nearly imperceptible tightening beneath his ribs. "And this person?" he asked gently. "What did they do?" "Last night," Beatrice whispered, "I saw someone leaving Clarissa's room. I thought it was a maid at first, but then I saw his shoes." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "His?" Beatrice nodded faintly. "Polished, dark brown. I remembered them. I remembered them because earlier that night I saw Clarissa staring at them with such fear." Poirot did not move. "And whose shoes were they, mademoiselle?" Beatrice's throat tightened as she forced the word out. "Dr. Marsh's." Across the room, Dr. Marsh froze, one hand still upon her wrist. Colour drained from his face. "How dare you?" he breathed. "This is absurd. I was never near Clarissa's room." Poirot rose slowly. "Dr. Marsh," he said quietly, "you knew of her fear. She asked for your help. You alone could gain access to anyone's room under the guise of medical concern. And her jewelry box, the missing necklace. Your profession requires fine tools and precision." Marsh stepped back, shaking his head. "Poirot, this is twisted. I have done nothing." But Poirot's voice cut through the air with the soft authority of a judge's gavel. "And yet Clarissa feared someone, deeply, not Lionel. not a stranger. Poirot's gaze locked onto Marsh's trembling hands. Someone with charm, influence, and access. Marsh backed toward the wall, breath quickening. "This is insane. You have no proof?" "Ah," Poirot murmured. "But the little grey cells. They arrange themselves most elegantly." He stepped closer. "You were seen returning from the garden. You lied about the shadow you saw. Clarissa sought your help, and you silenced her before she could speak. You placed a note to mislead us, and you removed the necklace, the Harwood star." Marsh's composure collapsed. Desperation leaked into his voice. "Stop it, Poirot. Stop it before you ruin everything." Poirot's mustache twitched ever so slightly. "Everything," he repeated softly. "So there is something to ruin." Marsh's eyes darted around wildly, calculating escape, denial, anything. But it was too late. Poirot had already seen the truth beginning to crack through the veneer, and the next step, he knew, would force the truth into the open, whether Marsh wished it or not. Dr. Marsh's back pressed against the paneled wall, his breath coming in short, shallow bursts. For a moment, no one moved, not Simmons, not the maid, not Beatrice, who lay trembling upon the chaise. Poirot's stillness, however, carried a quiet authority that filled the room. He did not advance. He merely observed, head tilted the slightest fraction, as though waiting for Marsh to reveal a truth he no longer had the strength to hide. At last, Marsh spoke, though his voice was strained, fraying at the edges. "You twist everything, Poirot. You take coincidences and—" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him with a single, precise gesture. "No, doctor, I do not twist. I untangle. A very different skill." The words hung in the room like suspended glass. Poirot approached Beatrice once more, his gaze thoughtful. "Mademoiselle, you saw Dr. Marsh leaving Clarissa's room. Did he see you?" Beatrice's eyes fluttered open. Weak as she was, her voice carried resolve. "No, he was in a hurry. He didn't look behind him." Poirot nodded slowly, then turned back to Marsh. "You see, Doctor, a single thread pulled, and the whole tapestry loosens." Marsh's hands balled into trembling fists. "I was not in Clarissa's room. I would never have harmed her." Poirot stepped forward, finally closing the distance between them. He spoke quietly, gently, but every word struck with the precision of a blade. "And yet you admit she sought you out for help. You admit she was frightened. She feared upsetting Lord Harwood. She went to you instead. Why?" Marsh opened his mouth, but no words came. Poirot continued, "Did she fear your temper, Doctor? The temper so carefully hidden beneath your practiced calm?" Marsh flinched, a damning reaction. "A doctor," Poirot said softly, "is entrusted with life, and because of that trust, he gains access to places and confidences denied to others. Clarissa trusted you. That is what makes your betrayal very possible." Marsh's voice cracked. "Enough." But Poirot was not cruel, nor did he press with the force of accusation. Instead, he stepped back, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. "Let us, for the moment," he said, "set aside guilt. Let us consider opportunity." He began to pace, his hands clasped behind him. Lady Clarissa telephoned someone in secret. She was last seen distraught. She asked Dr. Marsh for help. A quarrel occurred. A scream was heard. A man's voice, urgent, was heard next. Footprints led away from the conservatory. Someone carried a heavy burden through the corridor, and the Harwood star, valued beyond imagination, vanishes. He paused, turning toward Marsh. "Such things rarely indicate romance, I fear. They speak instead of leverage. Blackmail, threat, coercion." Marsh closed his eyes, pain flickering across his face. Poirot pressed on, his voice now softer, almost sorrowful. "Doctor, did Clarissa discover something? About you?" The question fell into the room like a stone dropped into still water. Marsh's eyes snapped open. "No," he whispered. "She didn't know anything." "But you feared she did," Poirot murmured. "That much is evident. The fear in your eyes is not of guilt for harming her. It is fear of exposure." Lord Harwood, who had hovered at the doorway, unable to stay away despite Poirot's earlier caution, stepped forward. His face was pale, his voice trembling. "Julian? What have you done?" Marsh covered his face with both hands. His shoulders shook. "I didn't take the necklace," he said hoarsely. "And I didn't hurt Clarissa. I swear it." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Then what are you protecting?" Marsh let his hands fall. For the first time, he looked defeated. I have debts," he confessed quietly. "Enormous debts. Gambling. Stupid, reckless decisions. I've been trying to cover them for months." Lord Harwood staggered. "Julian," Marsh continued, voice raw, "I never meant for it to go this far. I borrowed from people you don't cross, people who don't wait. I just thought that perhaps I could appeal to Clarissa. Not for money, but for time. She has influence, friends in legal circles. She could have helped me negotiate." Poirot's gaze never left him. Then she refused. "Yes," Marsh whispered. "She said she could not be part of my mess. She was frightened by how desperate I'd become. She said she'd tell Lord Harwood if I didn't stop. I panicked. I swear I didn't threaten her, but she was afraid." Poirot nodded. "Fear is contagious. It can spread even without intent. She avoided you afterward." "Yes." "Then why were you near her room?" Marsh hesitated. "Too long." "I wasn't—" Poirot cut him off. "Doctor, you lie badly. That alone tells me something important." Marsh turned away. "I only wanted to apologize, to explain myself. But she wasn't there, and I fled before anyone saw me. I knew how it would look." Poirot watched him closely. Marsh's fear was real, his desperation palpable. But there was something about his confession, though emotional, missing a crucial piece. "Dr. Marsh," Poirot said gently, "if you did not harm Clarissa, if you did not orchestrate her disappearance, then answer me this. Why place no alarm when she vanished? Why let suspicion fall upon Captain Rathbone, upon others?" Marsh's expression twisted. "Because I was afraid my involvement, my debts, would implicate me. I thought, if Rathbone took the blame, it would buy me time." Lord Harwood staggered back as though struck. Poirot nodded, absorbing this. "A selfish motive, Doctor, but not necessarily a murderous one." He stepped closer. "Tell me truthfully, Julian Marsh, did you see Clarissa Harwood after she left the conservatory?" Marsh blinked at him. The room held its breath. "No," he whispered. "I didn't." Poirot stared at him a long, probing moment. Then, unexpectedly, Poirot shook his head. Slowly. "No," he murmured. "You're not the one. You're a coward, Dr. Marsh, but not a criminal mastermind." Marsh sagged in relief and shame. Lord Harwood swallowed hard. If not him, then who? Poirot turned toward the window. The light outside had shifted. Long shadows pointed toward the hedge maze as though beckoning him. He spoke quietly, but with unmistakable certainty. "There is another. Someone whose actions no longer match their words. Someone whose fear is not guilt, but discovery." He walked to the door. "It is time," Poirot said, "to gather everyone. The truth is very near." His eyes gleamed. "And in the maze of lies, there is only one path left untraveled." They gathered in the grand drawing-room at Poirot's request, Lord Harwood pale and hollow-eyed, Beatrice still weak but resolute, Captain Rathbone pacing like a caged animal, Dr. Marsh withdrawn and shaken. The fog outside had thinned to a ghostly veil, through which the distant hedge maze loomed like a brooding sentinel. Poirot stood at the center of the room, hands clasped behind him, his posture serene despite the tension that crackled in the air. "Mes amis," he began softly, "we stand now at the end. The threads of this affair have been tangled, intentionally so. But at last, the little grey cells have arranged them into a pattern." Lord Harwood swallowed. "Poirot, have you found her, my daughter?" Poirot met his eyes with gentle gravity. "She is alive." The words broke over the room like a wave. Rathbone exhaled sharply. Beatrice stifled a sob. Marsh closed his eyes with visible relief. "But where is she?" Lord Harwood demanded. "Who took her? Why?" "Ah," Poirot said, "there you touch the heart of the matter. Let us walk the path together, a path that leads, quite literally, into the maze." He gestured to the window. "Last night someone carried a burden through the corridor. Someone who feared being seen. Someone who dragged, rather than lifted. That was not the weight of a body. It was the weight of a frightened, struggling young woman being guided against her will." Rathbone stepped forward, voice tight. "Poirot, if you imply—" "Patience, Captain. If it were you, I would not have said she was alive." Rathbone froze, stunned. Poirot continued. "Footprints led toward the lake, but then vanished. A clever misdirection. No one truly approached the water. Instead, a second trail, partially erased, led toward the hedge maze. Our culprit relied on the fog to conceal this," Beatrice whispered. "The maze? But why there?" Poirot turned to her. "Because the maze has a keeper, someone who knows it intimately, someone who could hide anything or anyone within its twisting passages." He looked toward the doorway. "And that person is Mr. Arthur Pemberton." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Captain Rathbone swore under his breath. Lord Harwood stared, stunned. The door creaked open, and Pemberton himself stood there. Simmons had clearly fetched him before the gathering. His expression was outwardly composed, but his eyes flickered with something cornered. "Poirot," he said, voice strained with forced calm, "what is the meaning of this? I have done nothing." Poirot inclined his head. "Au contraire, monsieur, you have done everything." He approached Pemberton, studying his face with quiet precision. "Lady Clarissa discovered something last night, something that threatened you. Your management of the Harwood estate was not merely incompetent, it was fraudulent." Pemberton's composure cracked. "You have no proof." Poirot lifted a hand. "Clarissa found it. Her private telephone call was not to a lover or an accomplice. It was to her bank, confirming suspicious withdrawals. Withdrawals made by you." Lord Harwood staggered. "Arthur, my oldest friend." Pemberton's eyes darted wildly. "Edmund, you mustn't listen." Poirot stepped between them. "Clarissa confronted you. You panicked, but you could not kill her. No, you are not a man of violence. Instead, you sought to hide her, to keep her silent until you could flee. The maze, your refuge. You alone know its locked gardener's shed, its abandoned cellar." Beatrice trembled. "You hid her there?" "Yes," Poirot said, turning to Lord Harwood. "Clarissa is frightened, but unharmed. She was bound, yes, but not brutally. Pemberton hoped to retrieve her once he escaped with forged documents and stolen funds." Lord Harwood stared at Pemberton with horror. "Arthur, after everything—" Pemberton's facade collapsed. "I never meant for it to go so far. I only needed time. 1 week more. Clarissa threatened to expose me. I couldn't lose everything." Rathbone lunged forward, but Poirot raised an arm to stop him. "Violence will solve nothing," Poirot said calmly. "The truth is exposed." Pemberton's shoulders sagged. His voice shook. She wouldn't stay quiet. "I had to take her to the maze. She screamed. I covered her mouth. I didn't hurt her. I swear it. I just needed her out of sight." Poirot nodded. "And the false note? A clumsy attempt to suggest she left voluntarily." Pemberton crumpled into a chair. "Defeated?" "Yes." Everything was falling apart. Lord Harwood turned away, grief and betrayal etched deep into his face. Beatrice wept quietly. Rathbone stood trembling with pent-up rage. Marsh watched with hollow exhaustion, his own sins overshadowed by the far greater crime before them. Poirot moved toward the door. "There is no time to lose. Inspector Graves waits outside. Clarissa must be freed at once." He met Lord Harwood's eyes with gentle firmness. "Courage, my lord. Your daughter is frightened, but she lives, and she will need her father." They hurried out together. Poirot, Lord Harwood, Simmons, and 2 officers, toward the garden where the morning fog had finally lifted. The maze loomed ahead, a twisting labyrinth of evergreen walls. But Poirot walked with steady certainty. He knew the way. Clarissa was found exactly where he predicted, in the maze's abandoned gardener's cellar, bound but unharmed, her eyes filling with relief at the sight of her father and Poirot. As she was carried safely back to the house, Lord Harwood embraced her with trembling arms. Poirot stepped back, allowing the flood of relief to wash over the family before turning quietly away. Rathbone approached him. "Poirot, I owe you an apology." Poirot smiled softly. "A man in love is often blind, Captain. It is not a crime. But perhaps you and Mademoiselle Clarissa will proceed with more honesty, yes?" Rathbone nodded solemnly. Beatrice approached next, offering a grateful, tearful gaze. Marsh said nothing but lowered his head in shame for his own failures. Poirot addressed neither directly. For now, there was peace in Winterbourne. Poirot retrieved his hat and coat from the stand near the front door. Simmons opened it for him with reverence. "Will you be returning to London, sir?" Poirot adjusted his cuffs. "But of course, there are other mysteries waiting, and Hercule Poirot must not keep them waiting." He paused, his moustache lifting. "Besides, this house has had quite enough disorder. I prefer things neat." He stepped out into the crisp morning, the sun warming the frost-brittle lawns as the maze behind him finally yielded its captive. Poirot tipped his hat, a small smile curving his lips. "Order restored," he murmured, "as it always must be." And with that, Hercule Poirot departed Winterbourne, leaving behind justice, clarity, and a family forever changed by the truth.